Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're here today with Erin Kerrigan, the founder and the managing director of Kerrigan Advisors. Erin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Todd.
Well, I know that dealers are going to be very excited that you're going to be speaking at this year's CADA Summit that's happening February 16th online now because of the outbreak of the pandemic has led to sort of it being an online only event. But you're going to be joining and sharing some of your thoughts. It's obviously a very interesting time in the dealer acquisition market. So tell us a little bit, give us a sneak preview, if you will, of what dealers can expect on that day when they show up for the summit.
Sure. I'm going to be talking about the drivers of the increased level of M&A activity and buy-sell activity we're seeing in the auto retail industry, as well as the drivers of valuation. And it's certainly an interesting time to value a dealership, given the extreme swings in earnings that we have seen in the last 2 years, really since the pandemic started. So I'm going to discuss those topics as well as some of the cross-border transaction activity we've seen, certainly a very large transaction recently. We do expect to see more of that, even though in some cases it's pretty hard to get back and forth across the border. We do think that you are going to continue to see more buy-sell activity between Canadian and US dealers, both ways, by the way. So I'll be covering all those topics.
Well, that's great, and I'm sure dealers will want to know certainly about Canadian dealers often cast an eye south and figure out what's going on, in that marketplace because it signals, what we can expect as well in the climate. So, obviously you talk to a lot of dealers. I think your firm has been involved in over 100 sales in the past 5 years. So certainly you've got the ear of dealers and you know where they're at with this uncertainty and volatility, whether it's the supply issues or the pandemic, and it's been such a volatile period. How are dealers feeling overall? Like, would you say?
We just recently did a dealer survey. It's our third annual dealer survey. We had over 800 dealers answer the survey. And by the way, that's anyone in our database. So that would be a North American survey, really. We do have both Canadian and US dealers in our database. And what we found is that the sentiment is extremely positive. Dealers, of course, mostly are making more money than they ever have. So profitability is at record levels. And they see that some of the changes that have occurred in the industry, higher grosses, more efficient labor force, they see some of those as sustainable. And therefore, most are bullish. Most dealers are buyers, not sellers, which I'll talk about more in the presentation, why that might be. And so while there is tremendous consolidation, I would say that as a whole, the sentiment amongst dealers is very positive, and most want to be part of that trend. They want to be on the buy side.
Which is interesting because in recent years, we've talked a lot about the challenges facing the industry with trying to migrate to a more digital experience, better consumer experience. Certainly we have the wave of EV vehicles coming that's going to impact things like service revenue. So there's an awful lot of talk just in the industry in general about all these, disruptive changes, and if dealers are ready, and if maybe the traditional mom and pop shop wants to get out before they have to embrace all of this change. But that's interesting to hear that sentiment is so good. I guess it's what have you done for me lately? If you're profitable now, I guess dealers, being optimists and entrepreneurs, they feel that trend will continue, right?
Well, dealers are usually inherently quite optimistic folk, and I think that's one of their secrets to success. I would say that one thing that we find very fascinating as a firm, and something we're keeping a close eye on, is the fact that all these industry changes that are certainly covering the industry news media quite significantly in terms of electrification, the threat of direct to consumer, which is a bigger threat in Canada than in the US because our franchise laws are much more robust. That has not been priced in to blue sky or goodwill. And that has been pretty interesting to our firm, that we really aren't seeing buyers say, hey, you know, I see how the business is doing today, but what happens when the fleet's all electric? What happens to the P&L of this business you're selling, Kerrigan Advisors? We aren't getting that question. And so in my view, that speaks volumes as to those that are the most acquisitive. They don't believe yet that they can pro forma that future, and that means they don't know what it looks like and when it's going to happen. So while we do see an awful lot of news headlines that seem to attract a lot of attention, we're not seeing it in the markets, in the buy sell market, in the valuations of dealerships yet.
Well, that's one thing. It's interesting. Certainly, I've been covering dealers for a while. Something I've seen is they're very entrepreneurial, but they're also very adaptable. So I think that as a group, they're probably recognizing they can equip and adapt, to the changes that are coming, and that they'll figure it out. And that's very interesting to hear the optimism. I could talk to you all day because I'm curious. You have all this great data and insights about what's going on in the minds of dealers, which is what I try to find out all day for Canadian Auto Dealer. But maybe I'll just let it go with that, and just we'll have to tell the dealers if they want the full understanding of everything, they're gonna have to attend the summit and hear you directly, right?
Yes, well, I hope they do, and I look forward and appreciate the opportunity to speak to your dealers next month.
Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us, Erin.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Okay, signing off.